Some nightclubs weren't just about music and dancing. They became crime scenes, scandals, and even places where people lost their lives. These 15 American clubs were once the hottest tickets in town, until controversy shut them down. Studio 54, New York City. New York, 1977. The city pulsed with restless energy, and at its heart stood Studio 54, a former television studio reborn as the Temple of Disco. It became the place where dreams and madness danced together. Inside, the nights felt like theater. Andy Warhol sketching in a corner, Bianca Jagger entering on a white horse, Michael Jackson quietly soaking in the spectacle. Getting past the velvet rope was like passing into another world. Once inside, the glitter, the music, the haze of cocaine made you believe anything was possible. But beneath the sparkle was chaos. Laws meant nothing. Champagne poured, drugs were traded as casually as smiles, and the owners bragged about millions in cash stashed away in ceilings and walls. That arrogance was their undoing. By 1980, the FBI stormed in, convictions followed, and the music stopped. Studio 54 lived like a comet, bright, reckless, unforgettable. 3 short years, and then only legend remained. The limelight, New York City. In the 1980s, New York nightlife found its cathedral, literally. The limelight rose inside a Gothic church where stained glass washed the dance floor in strange colors. Inside, reality bent. Club kids strutted in glitter and neon, drag queens turned hallways into runways, and Wall Street brokers slipped in to chase thrills. Every night was performance art, every corner a stage. But the spectacle hid shadows. Drugs weren't just part of the scene, they were the scene. Ecstasy, ketamine, cocaine, the whole alphabet of excess. Then came 1996. Promoter Michael Alig murdered Angel Melendez, a fellow club kid. The crime shocked even jaded New Yorkers and turned the limelight into a symbol of decadence gone rotten. At the same time, Giuliani's crackdown on nightlife zeroed in on owner Peter Gatien. Police padlocks, endless court battles, tax charges. Eventually, the Church of Chaos fell silent. Today, the limelight lingers as memory, a temple where creativity, hedonism, and tragedy danced until the music died. Twilo, New York City. By the mid-1990s, Manhattan had a heartbeat that seemed to come from one place: Twilo, hidden in a cavernous Chelsea warehouse. This was no ordinary club. It was a temple for electronic music, where legendary DJs like Sasha, Digweed, and Danny Tenaglia spun sets that stretched from midnight into sunrise. Hours blurred, the bass rattled through your bones. For a moment, the outside world didn't exist, but Twilo's magic carried a darker edge. The club became infamous as a supermarket for ecstasy and GHB. Rumors spread of unconscious ravers hidden in back rooms, of private ambulances rushing overdosed kids away to avoid police attention. In 2000, when a young woman collapsed and died after a night inside, the scrutiny reached a breaking point. Giuliani's administration seized its chance. Licenses revoked, padlocks on the doors, Twilo was finished. Yet for those who danced there, it remains untouchable. A lost cathedral of rave, where freedom and danger pulsed to the same relentless beat. Plato's Retreat, New York City. Imagine New York in the late 1970s. Disco glitter in the air, a sense that anything was possible. And then, Plato's Retreat. Hidden in the basement of the Grand Ansonia Hotel, it wasn't a dance club at all. No strobes, no DJs. Instead, it offered mattresses, hot tubs, and dimly lit rooms where couples came not to watch, but to join. Only heterosexual pairs were allowed through the door, and once inside, the rules of the outside world dissolved. People swapped partners with ease, strangers became lovers in minutes, and the night stretched on in a haze of freedom and taboo. For a while, Plato's felt untouchable, even chic, part scandal, part playground, whispered about from Park Avenue to the suburbs. But then, the AIDS crisis arrived, and suddenly the club's open sexuality looked less like liberation and more like danger. In 1985, city health officials padlocked its doors. Plato's Retreat closed, leaving behind the memory of an era when New York dared to live without restraint. The Cotton Club, Harlem. Step back into Harlem in the 1920s. The streets were alive with jazz, and at the center of it all stood the Cotton Club. On stage, legends were born. Duke Ellington's orchestra, Cab Calloway's wild energy, Lena Horne's grace. The music was electric, the reviews dazzling, the nights unforgettable. Yet the glamour carried a bitter twist. The performers were black, but the audience was not. The Cotton Club, run by mobster Oni Madden, enforced a strict whites-only policy, even as it showcased the very talent it excluded from the seats. For years, it was the jewel of prohibition nightlife, fine liquor, gangster money, and the hottest acts in America. But when the Harlem Riot of 1935 shook the city, white patrons stopped venturing uptown. The club moved to Midtown, but the magic never followed. By 1940, tax troubles and waning popularity sealed its fate. The Cotton Club lingers as a paradox, a birthplace of jazz brilliance, shadowed by segregation and crime. Pandora's Box, Los Angeles. In the mid-1960s, Pandora's Box stood awkwardly on a traffic island along the Sunset Strip. Small, neon-painted, and crowded, it hardly looked like a landmark, but for teenagers, it was magic. Local bands blasted raw rock and roll, kids filled the sidewalks, and the place became the restless heart of Los Angeles youth culture. Parents hated it. Politicians called it chaos. To young people, it was freedom. In 1966, the city struck back with a strict 10 p.m. curfew. The reaction was immediate. On November 12th, hundreds of kids, joined by Jack Nicholson and Peter Fonda, rallied outside Pandora's Box. What began as a peaceful protest spiraled into shouting, police clashes, and arrests. The Sunset Strip riots stretched over several nights and inspired Stephen Stills to write For What It's Worth, an anthem that still echoes today. By year's end, the club was padlocked. In 1967, bulldozers flattened it. Pandora's Box vanished, but its spark lit a generation's fight for freedom. The Starwood, West Hollywood. On Santa Monica Boulevard in the late 70s, the Starwood was more than a club. It was a rite of passage. Van Halen tore up its stage before fame, Mötley Crüe swaggered under its neon, and countless young bands treated it like holy ground. The vibe was raw and reckless, walls shaking, bodies pressed together, smoke curling thick above the crowd. But the music was only half the story. Owner Eddie Nash was a nightlife kingpin with ties to LA's underworld. Inside, drugs weren't hidden, they were celebrated. Quaaludes passed like candy, cocaine-lined tables, and a doctor next door fueled the legend of Camp Quaalude. By 1981, the dream collapsed. Nash was tied to the bloody Wonderland murders. Police raids uncovered thousands of pills, and the doors were padlocked. Soon after, a mysterious fire erased the building. The Starwood burned out like its bands, loud, reckless, unforgettable, and gone too soon. The Viper Room, West Hollywood. The Viper Room opened its doors in 1993 and instantly became Hollywood's most notorious playground. Partly owned by Johnny Depp, it wasn't big or flashy, but that was the point. The place was intimate, a secret haven for actors, musicians, and models who wanted to escape the spotlight while chasing the darker thrills of the Strip. One night you might catch Keanu Reeves jamming on stage. The next you'd see Kate Moss blowing out birthday candles surrounded by rock stars. But from the very beginning, the club carried a shadow. On Halloween night in 1993, River Phoenix collapsed on the sidewalk outside after a drug overdose. He was 23. That tragedy etched the Viper Room into infamy. The years that followed brought more whispers, overdoses, secret poker games in the basement, even the mysterious disappearance of Depp's business partner. Despite the scandals, or maybe because of them, the Viper Room became a legend. It was Hollywood distilled. Glamour, danger, and heartbreak packed into a tiny room on Sunset Boulevard. Carousel Club, Dallas. In the early 60s, the Carousel Club was one of Dallas's gaudiest little dens. Red velvet wallpaper, glittering posters of showgirls, a cramped stage where burlesque dancers worked the crowd. Its owner, Jack Ruby, was larger than life, charming one moment, violent the next. He adored his dancers, but he also screamed at them, shoved them, ruled the place with a gun on his hip and a temper ready to explode. The Carousel wasn't glamorous. It was seedy, smoky, and a little dangerous. Still, it drew in businessmen, cops, and drifters looking for cheap thrills. Ruby himself was the attraction. Always at the bar, always talking too loud, always hustling. Then came November 1963. Just 2 days after President Kennedy was assassinated, Jack Ruby stepped out of his world of strippers and neon lights and into history. On live television, he shot Lee Harvey Oswald. The Carousel Club closed overnight. What remained of its glitter was sold off years later at auction. Today, it's remembered not as nightlife, but as a dark footnote in America's most haunting tragedy. The station, West Warwick, Rhode Island. On a freezing February night in 2003, the station looked like any other small-town rock club. Low roof, sticky floors, a crowd hungry for nostalgia. Great White took the stage, the guitars loud, the mood electric. Then came the sparks. A burst of pyrotechnics kissed the cheap foam on the walls, and in an instant, the room was fire. Flames climbed, black smoke rolled, and joy collapsed into panic. The crowd surged for the exits, but doors jammed, others were hidden, and in the crush, people fell, piling on one another. In just 6 minutes, the building was gone. 100 lives lost. 200 more scarred inside and out. Investigators later revealed what everyone feared: neglect and greed, flammable foam, no sprinklers, overcapacity. The station became a grim symbol of how quickly carelessness turns to catastrophe. Today, a memorial park marks the site, a quiet space where the music stopped, but the memory refuses to fade. Coconut Grove, Boston. Boston, in the early 1940s, was a city dressed in wartime glamour. Soldiers on leave filled the streets, movie stars dropped in for publicity, and everyone who was anyone seemed to end their night at the Coconut Grove. It was a fantasy world of palm trees, fake coconuts, and painted skies, a tropical dream built inside a supper club. Couples dined, danced, and lost themselves in the music, never suspecting how fragile it all was. On the night of November 28, 1942, that dream went up in flames. More than 1,000 people crowded inside, far beyond legal capacity. A small spark in the basement lounge caught the fabric ceiling, and within minutes, fire rolled through the building. Exit doors were locked, the revolving entrance jammed, and panic sealed the fate of hundreds. By night's end, 490 souls were gone. The tragedy shocked America. Owner Barney Wilansky went to prison. Fire codes were rewritten nationwide, and Coconut Grove became a ghost story. Its palm trees turned to ashes, but its lessons still shape every club we walk into today. Upstairs Lounge, New Orleans. On a Sunday evening in June 1973, the Upstairs Lounge was buzzing with laughter and music. It was Pride weekend, and the little second-floor bar in New Orleans had become a sanctuary for the city's gay community. People crowded around tables during the weekly beer bust, singing along to the piano, free to be themselves in a world that rarely allowed it. Then, in an instant, joy turned to horror. An angry patron, thrown out earlier, doused the stairwell, the only exit, with gasoline and lit a match. Flames shot upward, smoke choked the room, and dozens of people were trapped. 32 never made it out. The tragedy was met not with compassion, but silence. Newspapers downplayed it. Churches refused funerals. Families turned their backs on loved ones. No one was ever convicted. For decades, the fire was a ghost story, whispered but rarely honored. Today, memorials stand in New Orleans, belatedly acknowledging what the city once tried to ignore: that the Upstairs Lounge was more than a bar. It was a refuge, and its loss became a turning point in LGBTQ history. Happy Land, Bronx, New York City. It was carnival season in the Bronx, March 1990, and the little club called Happy Land pulsed with Latin rhythms. Inside the cramped second floor, dancers pressed shoulder to shoulder, sweating, laughing, alive. It was an illegal after-hours spot. No sprinklers, no alarms, just music and bodies moving until dawn. For the immigrant community that gathered there, it was a taste of home, a refuge from hard days and cold nights. Then, in a burst of fury, it became a death trap. Julio Gonzalez, angry after a fight with his ex-girlfriend, poured gasoline on the club's narrow stairwell and lit a match. The fire raced upward, cutting off the only exit. Within minutes, 87 people were gone, trapped, choking, burned. It was New York's deadliest fire in decades. The tragedy exposed negligence on every level. Officials had long ordered the club closed, but no one enforced it. Today, a small memorial plaque marks the site, but the name Happy Land carries only sorrow. A cruel irony etched into the city's history. E2 Nightclub, Chicago. Chicago in the early 2000s had no shortage of hotspots, but E2 was something different. Sleek, stylish, always packed, it drew a young, glamorous crowd that wanted to dance until dawn. The upstairs floor pulsed with hip-hop and R&B, while the downstairs bar promised cocktails and conversation. It felt modern, fast, untouchable. But beneath the shine, danger lurked. On February 17, 2003, a fight broke out. Security sprayed pepper spray into the crowd, a decision that turned chaos into catastrophe. Panic spread. Hundreds rushed toward the single staircase. Bodies piled up, people fell, and the exit became a trap. Within minutes, 21 lives were gone, crushed in the stampede. The horror deepened when investigators revealed that the upstairs club wasn't even supposed to be open. A court had ordered it shut months earlier for safety violations. The owners ignored it, and the city failed to enforce it. E2 never reopened. For years, the building stood like a scar on Michigan Avenue, a silent reminder that negligence can be just as deadly as fire. The Mutiny Club, Miami. In late 70s Miami, the Mutiny wasn't just a nightclub, it was an empire of excess. Tucked inside the Mutiny Hotel in Coconut Grove, it offered velvet lounges, tropical cocktails, and the sense that anything could happen behind closed doors. And it did. Movie stars rubbed shoulders with cocaine traffickers. Rock legends partied next to international businessmen whose briefcases held more than contracts. Deals worth millions were whispered over champagne and mountains of white powder. The stories sound like fiction, guests lighting $100 bills on fire in a hot tub just to prove they could. Entire rooms turned into ad hoc boardrooms where the cocaine cowboys negotiated shipments that would shape the city. It was glamorous, dangerous, and intoxicating all at once. But the high couldn't last. By the mid-80s, Miami was drowning in cartel violence. The Mutiny's guest list thinned. Too many were dead, jailed, or on the run. In 1985, the club closed, its neon gone dark. Today, it survives in legend, remembered as the real-life Babylon that inspired Scarface. 15 clubs, 15 legends, each wilder than the last. They've vanished, but their stories still echo. Which one shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more forgotten tales of nightlife, crime, and culture, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. The next story is already waiting.